All right, we are live. Thanks for tuning in to the Sheet Metal Shaping Podcast, where we discuss the pursuit of sheet metal shaping education through traditional coach building techniques. My guest today on the show, I'm so pumped for this, Jeff Thompson from the Greater Toronto area, Outshined Copper and Outshined Metal on Instagram. What's up, man? Thanks for being here.
Hey, Ryan. Thanks very much for having me. I'm truly honored to be on the show. It's pretty awesome. I was quite impressed when he asked me. That's awesome.
A fellow Canadian. I like it.
Yes, yes. You see a lot of guys from in the States or over in Europe, and
Yeah.
you don't see as much from Canada. So here we are.
Perfect. For anybody who hasn't checked out Jeff's Instagram, Outshined Metal and Outshined Copper, two Instagram accounts that he has on Instagram. This guy makes some spectacular stuff. So if you can see in his background, I'm gonna boast about you here, Jeff, just because your stuff is wicked. If you can see in his background, he's got like architectural copper that is just, it'll just blow your mind. And that's the theme of today's show is working with copper alloys and how you're blending architecture and automotive uses into one. So I'm pumped about this. Tell the folks at home about yourself.
Oh, my name's Jeff Thompson. I live in Barrie, Ontario, which is about an hour north of Toronto. Probably the biggest city in Canada, I guess. Yeah, basically, I own Outshined Copper and Outshined Metal. Outshined Copper sort of specializes in architectural type sheet metal work. We do a lot of awnings, chimney caps, cupolas, fancy vents, backsplashes, and fancy trim work and stuff of that nature. And then more recently, I've created Outshined Metal, basically on the side from owning all these tools and the interest that I have. I got quite into making automotive restoration panels and sort of custom hot rod and automotive type related pieces. And really, I mean, at a point, it was like some of this stuff doesn't really fit with Outshine Copper, if you will.
Mhm.
And the guy looking for a fancy chimney cap maybe doesn't care about a Model A quarter panel, and
That's right.
maybe the opposite way around. The guy looking for having his hot rod work done didn't really care about a awning that you'd made or whatever. So it just sort of made sense to have the two, be somewhat separate from each other. And yeah, it's what I do every day between the two businesses. Yeah, it keeps me busy for sure.
It's smart to break it up like that. I think you're bang on. Like the guy with the hot rod's
Yeah,
like, what am I going to do with a cupola? And the guy with the cupola is like, what do I do with a hot rod? Right?
you got it. And so it just sort of made sense to sort of yeah, kind of break the two into two different things, and it seems to be working out all right. So I think it was a good
That's that's
decision.
good. Why copper? What is it about copper that just, stands out for you?
there's there's just something so beautiful about the copper material. I'll admit, as many rolls of it as I've opened up or sheets, pull out or whatever. Um, there's just something about the material that's so beautiful looking. I love the way too that it actually kind of ages, and there's sort of a real life to the material, if you will. I mean, it might start out shiny, and as it's outside and it ages over time and everything, it'll kind of brown out or even start getting kind of aquamarine to it if it's out a real long time, depending on the atmosphere and everything. And it's just really cool having something that sort of grows and changes through its lifetime.
That's true. That the color of copper is just something else. I mean, it's like gold, kind of. It's got
Yeah,
this intoxicating
yeah,
look to it. It just pulls you in. It's got depth and character, right?
sure. There's just sort of like a really classy, kind of rich type look to it.
Hmm.
When you see something really nice and it's made out of copper, there's no denying it's a high-end, classy type material to be using. I also really like, hey, you obviously solder it together, waterproof it for things that are outside, and
Hmm.
more recently, I've gotten actually into TIG welding it together, and And yeah, and then obviously too, there's the more traditional riveting it together or just mechanical locking and everything to, get it all locked and waterproof and everything like that. So yeah, I really enjoy sort of all those aspects of it.
Now, what is the difference between shaping sheet metal and doing architectural work? Or sorry, let me rephrase. What's the difference between automotive uses for shaping metal versus architectural work where it's maybe more flat work or less or so on the shaping side? What are the two differences?
Oh, I guess obviously a good example might be say like a custom trim or something like that. Yeah, you know what? We could do something a little more uh basic, or if you will, or a little more plain Jane, where maybe it's all just bent. Um, you're really forming the metal. You're not exactly really shaping the metal, if you will. And then on the kind of further end of the spectrum, we could perhaps get into, say, where we're doing like a half round shape with a trim profile to it. Well, now we need to really stretch that trim out in the sections where
Mhm.
the profile is actually raised. And it is actually, quite a bit of work can go into actually stretching a piece out so you can, say run it through a pullmax through your dies,
Yeah.
actually form that shape into it. Um, yeah, these are all things you don't really think about until you try doing it and you're wondering why now the archway came out like a big U shape, and
Yeah.
it's time to start stretching.
That's
So
right.
yeah, these are all sort of things you learn along the way as you're getting into this. But yeah, I mean, really, you could take a straight piece of trim, run it through some dies you made for the pullmax, and that's relatively easy enough to do, if you will. But then, like I said, you start getting into some curved trim profiles or things of that nature, or maybe like the bottom of an awning with an actual trim profile where it wraps around, say, like a big half round shape or whatever. There is quite a bit of stretch work involved to get the profile to come out properly.
Now, for workability. So, if we compare the workability of copper to something like steel or aluminum, something a little bit more common that most people would use in the automotive industry, how does copper work by comparison?
So, one thing, especially compared to steel, and obviously aluminum will crack on you too. However, you do have a pretty good range you can kind of push it to until you start hitting the point you need to anneal it. With copper, you're going to need to anneal it far quicker than steel or aluminum. And so there are certain, shaping things I'll get into with the copper where, basically we're pulling out the torch, we're annealing it. I've certainly made many things where you might anneal that piece a dozen times from the beginning to the end of making it.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, you know what? You kind of need to sort of really learn that magic, literally the breaking point of it, if you will, because it's kind of disheartening. You could work on something for hours, days, and you put a big crack in it, and
Yep.
hey, sometimes you can repair it, but there's a lot of other times where what, it happened. You're you're easier off starting all over again. So
Jeez.
you try to avoid that, obviously.
We'll talk about welding here in a sec, but when you repair it, can you repair it such that the weld disappears? Like, do the alloys blend or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, so when I'm TIG welding copper, basically I'm using copper wire as my filler rod, and so the two metals, you can fuse them together quite well. And but like anything, it can take a considerable amount of work to hide the boo boo, if you will.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like really kind of try to avoid that happening in the first place. Is you know from experience, you basically learn
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to avoid that happening. Really.
For sure. You ever had an experience where you built something like that and it got messed up halfway through and you're like, ugh, Here we go.
Yes. I've done a couple sinks, and yeah, I totally remember this one sink, early enough into getting into really shaping the copper. And oh man, yep, you put a big tear in it all of a sudden. Well, hey, not a problem. I'm going to try to TIG that crack shut.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that one ended up getting thrown in the scrap bin.
Scrap bin. Oh man. And copper's so expensive too. It must be really disheartening to be like, oh, there it goes.
Oh, oh yeah. I mean, yeah, no one likes throwing out any materials, but yeah, why not make the material far more expensive than a piece of steel or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be a little disheartening, but yeah, like I say, sometimes actually having things of that nature kind of working against you, if you will, kind of makes you, tighten up a little bit on what you'll pull with it. It makes you say, you know what? No, time to anneal it again.
Yep.
We're not going to have it crack on us, and yeah, that all kind of comes with experience and everything, of course.
You ever make something out of steel or aluminum as a prototype and then transfer it to copper just to see how the material is going to move?
More so, perhaps for like the overall size and dimension of it, but not so much for, gee, I wonder how this profile would respond to, being curved slightly. Grab a piece of 16 gauge, and, it's not as comparable, if you will. So, um, yeah, as far as actually maybe doing kind of like a rough plan of something, I'll certainly maybe make it out of, a more affordable material, if you will, and then go for it out of copper. Or I'll make sometimes patterns out of, say, just like a kind of like a painted type steel, kind of like what we make like our black awnings and black chimney caps out of.
Yep.
Certainly quite a bit more affordable and a little lighter to work with. And so, yeah, I'll
Mhm.
make patterns and things for the copper out of that. But yeah, generally, if it's, to be made out of copper, just cut the
Do it in
copper
copper.
and start making it.
That's it. What about gauges and alloys? So break down the way that alloys work for copper.
Oh, that's a great question. I'll admit, maybe I don't get overly into that, but basically the copper that I work with is 20-ounce copper. So copper is sort of done in ounces, and basically that'd be a square foot would weigh 20 ounces. So it's not like, oh, get me a piece of 16 gauge, get me a piece of 18 gauge.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I work with is 20-ounce copper, and
Okay.
I
And how
find
thick would that be?
that is I believe that's 22 gauge.
Wow. So they're not very thick.
No, it's not super thick by any means, but it's good and strong, and it's easy enough to form and to kind of manipulate into shapes and everything like that. So and also too, it's you do need to sort of keep weight into consideration on some of these pieces. If we're making a large awning, it can't want to be tearing the house down.
Right? Yeah.
Too. So yeah, we try to keep the weight of certain types of items. It's certainly something you'd want to
Yeah.
bear in mind while you're creating it, right?
Pound for pound. I mean, if you compared it to steel, so like a 4x8 sheet of, we'll say 22 gauge or 20-ounce copper versus that of a, 18 gauge piece of steel, cold rolled. What would the weight be?
Oh, they'd be quite similar to each other.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, trying to think here, they'd both be in around 35, 40 pounds or so, I would estimate,
Hmm.
picking it up. So, yeah, weight wise, they're pretty similar to each other. Say like 18 gauge to 22-ounce copper, or sorry, 20-ounce copper.
Yeah. Interesting. And then in terms of crossing over to maybe an automotive use, would you up the thickness if you're going to make I want to talk about making a copper body at the end of this episode because I think it would be really just spectacular. But would you change the gauge or the thickness or the weight of the copper?
Yeah, I think you would want to go perhaps a little thicker if you were going to try to make. I, I have seen some AC Cobras made out of copper actually,
Yeah.
and I'll admit I don't know too much about them or anything,
Yeah.
but I would think they would be using a bit thicker than 20 ounce probably, just because oh, it'd ruin your day if some guy came up and put a ding in that, or you were out
Right.
driving around and oh, you got a dent in the car because a stone hit it, or
Yeah.
something like
And it would just be so glaringly obvious. Everything's all polished and buffed and perfect. And it's, there it is.
that. You'd be crying that day.
Weldability. What about weldability of copper? Let's talk about that. So you'd mentioned you were using copper rod. Is that deoxidized? Is that copper wire? What is it?
Basically, I'm using copper wire, like right out of the electrical wire of
Yep.
your home. So I take that and yeah, I like to clean everything up really good, acetone it. I don't run as high of a cubic foot per hour on the regulator. I'd run more like maybe like 10 or so and
Yep.
up the post flow a little bit, maybe like 6 seconds.
Hmm.
And you'll find too, it'll take a second to start getting that puddle going, and then you got to really move with it. It'll heat up very fast, and you need to, get boogie in with it. And yeah, it'll also sort of it's interesting how it really like holds the heat well, but then it will actually cool down quicker overall. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It is a little different than steel for sure.
So does it take
And
more amperage or less amperage to weld copper versus that of steel? Because aluminum obviously takes more, it dissipates the heat, and you need more juice,
yeah,
right? What does copper typically require?
it would be about the same as steel. Maybe a slight bit more, I guess, technically. And like I say, that's probably why I move a little quicker with it compared to steel, where you might, kind of hang out in the spot a little bit longer, so to speak.
Gotcha. So now let's talk automotive uses. So if you were gonna put copper, if you're gonna, what, I was gonna wait till the end to talk about the copper body, but I just don't want to. So let's talk about making a copper body. If you're gonna make a copper body, how would you go about doing that, and how would your processes change versus that of aluminum to steel?
Okay. I'll be really honest too. I've certainly never made a copper car body,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
if I were to do it, I would approach it in the same way as like an aluminum or steel panel, where I mean, you're going to want to have some sort of a buck or form of some sort in order to pull this off accurately to what you're actually trying to shoot for. Or if not, you know what, you can maybe make some gauges across it at certain segments and mark it all out really well and everything. I feel like making a paper pattern is a good way to really keep you on track of where you're trying to start and end up with the panel. And yeah, if you kind of laid it out that way with all your shaping and radiuses and yeah, all your flanges and everything you need to do, any body line details and stuff like that, I think that'd be how you'd want to go about approaching something of that nature.
So standard approach, really, like don't really change much. You're just changing the material that goes in the machine.
Exactly. And I kind of think that's a big enough thing of it because, yeah, and like I said, when I'd have, Outshine Copper, that's, the business I started, you get people where like, can you work with other metals? It's like, yes, of course I
Yeah.
can. So, yeah, I mean, it's surely similar enough.
Yeah. You're gonna have to start outshine bronze, outshine
Outshine bronze,
brass,
yeah,
outshine platinum.
outshine magnesium, yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, and that's why too, ultimately having outshine metal kind of down the road from that, it made sense for sure to kind of branch out a little bit, if you will.
So let's talk about crossing over. So you've got some really beautiful photos on Outshined Metal where you're working on a Model A. I think it was a sedan Model A, and you did this just like I just got lost in the photo. It was just so spectacular. You had all kinds of copper, ornate copper, um, just like running through the body and across a gas tank strap or something by the looks of it. I mean, for anybody who hasn't seen this, gosh, go and check out his Instagram. Tell the folks about that photo that I'm describing. It was just spectacular.
Yeah, so a customer brought a 30 Model A. Yeah, it's a two-door sedan, and it's chopped quite a bit, like 4, maybe even 5 inches. It's you can kind of put your boot toe underneath it practically. It's on the floor down there, and so either way, the customer brought it, and he had mentioned he really liked Outshined Copper. A lot of the work I do, for Outshined Copper. He wanted the interior done, and yeah, I kind of took a little bit of artistic liberty with it, if you will. Um, yeah, I kind of knew he liked dimple dyes and everything, so it was like,
Yeah.
well, why don't we run copper behind a whole bunch of the dimple dyes? And and yes, I understand some of these metals you're not, totally supposed to be putting together, but these are hot rods. We
Yeah.
make them to break the rules.
That's
So,
right.
you know, what's wrong with bending the rules a little bit here and there? It's not like something that's sitting outside all the time or whatever. So, yeah, we throw copper in with aluminum, and it sure looks good when you combine the two together because it really gives off this glow inside the car. Like, it's really cool to see. Like, I mean, it almost has this pinkish glow from within the car. It
Yeah.
surely reflects off all the aluminum and everything. And I even have a few pieces of aluminum where I'll run it through the plannishing hammer, put like a light radius, like a real low crown into it, and you start getting that, mirror-like shine happening off the aluminum. And I mean, that
Yeah.
copper tone's just bouncing off it. And
Mhm.
I gotta say, as good as it looks like in a little Instagram video or picture, I mean, when you see it in person,
The
it's just,
sparkles.
it's, yeah, like a little mine inside there you're looking into. So, yeah, very cool. But yeah, I thought, that was something really cool to do, and the customer loved it. So, yeah, that's great.
Amazing. What about tooling? Let's talk about tooling. How are you working this copper? What is the proper procedures in terms of shaping, forming, whether it's architecture, automotive? Like, what do you prefer to do, and why do you do that?
Okay, so I mean, you could get down to doing stuff, with just all plain straight bends and everything that really you might just need a shear and a brake. And I mean, if it's all just flat straight lines, you could kind of get away making awnings like that. But then uh, one of the more popular style of awnings we make is what's called a Juliet style, where it has curved swept hips on it that meet
Right.
into each other. Okay, well, you're going to need to start tipping flanges now and actually shrinking the flange and everything to get the curves properly into it. And every sweep on the front panel is all going to need to be shrunk and fit to each other. So you're going to need gauges made to do the proper radius that you're trying to form it to and everything. And then from there, like I say, you know what, we could get into making trims where, say, maybe it's like a half round shape awning that actually comes out like a half circle off the wall. Well, yeah, you're going to maybe need a pullmax or a machine similar like that with a die of the profile you've made, but you're going to need a way to stretch that. So, okay, English wheel, very good way of putting the stretch into it accurately to where you need to be hitting certain key spots in the trim profile to put the stretch. Say if you had like kind of like a trim, picture it like beads, if you will. So you might have like a big bead along the top, but it gets even larger towards the bottom. So maybe you're just putting a light amount of stretch into the smaller bead at the top, but the larger profile to the bottom, you're certainly going to need to stretch more. So yeah, I like doing that with my English wheel, and also I really like doing it with my plannishing hammer. So
Hmm.
yeah, I have a Trident English wheel. It's 36 inch, and then I also have the Jap hands, Karl Fisher, who
Oh,
was
good.
what was he, episode 3, I believe.
Yeah, yeah,
Either
yeah. He
way,
was one of the earlier episodes for sure.
for sure. So he made a planishing hammer, and I remember they did, yeah, sort of like what would you call it? Like you could order it early, and they were doing their first run. So I
Yeah.
got my name on the list, and it
Awesome.
showed up, and yeah, I like that quite a bit. I find yeah, it's quite a effective and accurate way of actually putting the stretch where you need it into the panel.
Do you prefer hammering or do you prefer the wheel?
That's a good question. I mean, there are certain times where I really like the uh, the wheel of just it can be a soothing thing to
Yeah.
use, if you will. It's very quiet overall. Um, it's almost somewhat relaxing, if you will. And then I don't have a real power hammer. I would love to have one, but the planishing hammer is obviously incredibly loud. It's, I would say, one of the loudest tools in the shop. You've got a compressor running the whole time to keep it going and everything. But at the same time, there's just something about that loudness and violence to the metal, if you will, that I really like. I went to Mike Wagner's course earlier this year at Cornfield Customs, and I
Yeah.
remember he described the difference as the wheeling machine is classical, the power hammers thrash metal. And I was
There you
like,
go.
now we're speaking my language. So yeah,
It's
I
true.
kind of like both aspects of it, if you will. But I think overall, I like the loud bashing.
What would, if you had a power hammer copper, like would the shine come out the same or similar to any other metal, or would anything change in that respect? Because I mean,
I
on the
think
wheel, it would come out just perfect, I'm sure.
yes. I think it would be. I've certainly done say like doming and things of that nature out of copper,
Hmm.
and it's very similar to steel or aluminum, where you're running it through, and especially the higher the crown to the panel, the more that shine's really coming on out of it. So yeah, it's very similar. You start stretching that metal, and like that shine really starts coming out in that piece. And yeah, I mean, yeah, you can absolutely have it at that point where you hold it up in front of your face, and it's like a mirror. You're
Yeah.
staring at yourself in this
Yeah.
piece that you're making. And yeah, there's really kind of something magical about that, if you will. It oh, it's an amazing thing to get to witness, right?
That must be extremely fulfilling for you to stand back and say, look what I built, right? I built this and it's going to go in someone's home or in someone's vehicle. Does that get you excited?
It really does. I'll admit, you know what, hey, I'll be quite honest. For a really long part of my life, making metal was, like as a tradesperson, where we're doing a ton of aluminum, but it's just on some pipe on a roof of a factory. And you could do the greatest job in the world. And at the end of the day, nobody really cared as long
No.
as it got done.
Yeah.
Or could it be cheaper?
Yeah. Yeah.
You start making this, stuff that's legitly art.
Yeah.
I think of it as art. And I mean, it really goes to a whole next level. And yeah, as a person, actually making it, I mean, it's quite inspiring to get to do. There's certainly days where, depending on what you're working on, I mean, you might wake up super early in the morning just because you're cranked to get to go to work today.
Yeah.
Wow. And because you're making something that's amazing. And yeah, I mean, and then too, yeah, I'll admit, I mean, I really do get a kick out of customers, calling me up or sending emails or whatever, where they're just like, "Oh my God, this is so much more amazing than what I thought it would be." And it's like, what did you think I was gonna make? Yeah,
That's right.
So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I really kind of get off on that aspect of it too, and I mean, a big thing I think too is I'm not trying to compare myself to other people or whatever, but I kind of do compare myself to myself, and
Sure.
I try to kind of outdo myself all the time. And I mean, it really kind of helps push yourself as a craftsman, a craftsperson, whatever, to keep pushing, keep doing better and everything. And I will say too, uh, Instagram, all this neat, modern technology stuff where you'll get people who you might have been looking at all their work that they make, and out of nowhere, that guy sent you a little message or whatever,
Yep.
just saying, hey man, it's like, holy, like, this is pretty amazing. This is just little old me here doing my thing, and it can be quite inspiring of a thing for sure to even just have certain people, let you know that they really dig what you're up to. So yeah, thanks to everyone who sends cool comments and messages and all that. I greatly do enjoy it, and to all the customers and everything. Thank you. I literally couldn't keep doing it without you. So
It's true.
yeah, thank you.
As we wrap this up, what's next for you? Like, what's the next big project that you're taking on?
Oh, I've got a couple Model A's on the go, and yeah, so get finished them. I do have a Model A Roadster pickup. I actually we were making it from scratch, like literally from flat panels and making paper patterns of pieces I had around the shop, and yeah, well, why not build a Model A? I can do that. So yeah, so I got that to keep finishing on, and then the copper things are always coming in, different chimney caps and things of that nature. So yeah,
Mhm.
it really is sort of you have to keep working on the customer items for sure, but then yeah, I've always got sort of personal projects, if you will, that I'm always working away at, and I think that's a huge part about really pushing your skills and everything is having pieces that you're working on and making that are
Mhm.
kind of really kind of taking it up to the next level there and everything. So yeah, lots to keep working at, that's for sure. And I got
Man.
a new shop just a couple months ago, so I find too you're always
Oh yeah.
setting up the shop to be as ideal as possible, and yeah, it's always a work in progress for sure.
That's right. It's never done, right? It's never done.
It's never done. And even if it was, you'd find something to keep going, and something would never be as good as it could be, and you'd want to keep improving on it, right?
Well, that's one thing I'll take from today's episode. Like, this was so much fun. And from this side of the mic, it's great to hear that, you're always improving, you're always learning, you're always growing. The biggest thing that I heard you say, in my opinion, is like, you're comparing yourself to yourself, right? You're not comparing yourself to somebody else. You're just comparing yourself to you. And like, if you can do better tomorrow, really at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? How can you grow? How can you evolve? How can you make a better product for your customers? So thank you so much for being here. How can people find out more about you on Instagram?
Oh, so we have at Outshined Copper on Instagram, and then at Outshined Metal on Instagram. And yeah, if you want anything made, or even just talk or whatever, yeah, feel free to shoot a message. And yeah, you can check out pictures of the work we do. And yeah, that's about it.
There you have it. Jeff Thompson. This is Sheet Metal Shaping Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.